You're watching ChillyBoy Productions. I'm Larry ChillyBoy Chillson, and this is my review for It Lives Inside. Now, before we get into this review, make sure to go ahead and click that subscribe button down below so that you can chill with me on each and every one of my latest videos. It Lives Inside is a 2023 supernatural horror film helmed by first-time director Bishal Dutta, who also wrote the screenplay. Desperate to fit in at school, Sam rejects her Eastern Indian heritage and family to be like everyone else. However, when a mythological demonic spirit latches itself onto her former best friend, she must come to terms with her heritage to defeat it. The film stars Megan Shuri, Mohana Krishnan, and Betty Gabriel. So I got to see It Lives Inside as part of the Regal Mystery Movie Monday program. So we went into tonight's movie technically not really knowing what the film was going to be. However, I had a very, very strong suspicion we were getting It Lives Inside. So I had to make sure I was at the mystery movie this week. Because, yeah, I was excited for this film. I saw the trailers. I thought they looked really intriguing, really inviting, and kind of gruesome. The premise seemed cool and unique. And, well, I'm kind of a horror junkie. So any horror fan so any new horror film, I'm likely ready to be seated. And ultimately, I thought this was actually quite a good film overall. So let's go ahead and talk about the positives first. Well, the biggest positive for me is the cultural groundwork upon which the entire film is based. It is a story rooted in Indian and Hindi mythology, and it really organically weaves the cultural aspects, the immigration story, and the difficulties that come with being an Indian immigrant in a white town really well. It never feels forced. It never feels like this unneeded forefront to a horror film. No, it's intrinsic to the characters and who they are. And it works itself into the actual theme of the horror monster very, very well. And I loved the themes of culture and kind of going back to your culture and your heritage and the strength in that and what that means. And also, we touch on blending culture and learning to meld into the culture you're a part of while maintaining your roots. And that's such a heavy theme of the film, and it works so well. It's really what elevates this and sets it apart from films that are quite similar in the same genre. On top of that, with the cultural aspect, it also serves as a nice coming of age film for our main character. Sam is going through a complete identity crisis, and the thing that this demon feeds off of directly feeds into her as a person and the growth that she needs to experience. And it works so well with her cultural identity crisis, her just general teenager identity crisis, as well as just growing into her own and being comfortable with who she is. And for that, I think the script was really sophisticated in weaving so many of these much more intricate and complicated stories into a demonic spiritual horror film. Also, obviously, we incorporate the actual mythology straight into the horror aspects themselves. So it's just doused in the culture. And I loved that about this film. I also love the demon design here. We get some practical effects that I thought worked really well. I really love the way that Dutta used his budget to his advantage. Obviously, it's not a huge budget film, so the way that we use shadow work is really well handled, and then getting that practical looking demon was fantastic and just added to that third act of the film itself. Plus, the coming together, the family aspect of trying to face the demon and the need to be with more than one person to do it worked beautifully as well. I thought the climax actually was a lot of fun for a horror film. I also loved the mechanics of the demon. that it was both kind of otherworldly, but also an actual presence in the real world. And then when we get to performances, I think Megan Suri in the lead is actually fantastic. She gives probably my favorite performance of the entire film. Because to be honest, some of the other performances are a little bit more up and down, but she is rock steady in this leading role. And as a complicated figure who does some pretty unlikable stuff as we move throughout parts of this film, does a great job at keeping you endeared and grounded in her as our protagonist that we're rooting for. The other performance that served as a standout was Neera Bajwa, who plays her mother. I thought she was actually fantastic in this film. Their dynamic together is one of the major linchpins of the entire film. And these two actresses are so good. So then, what doesn't work so well when it comes to It Lives Inside? Well, the biggest issue is that while we have all these cultural aspects and we're getting a new culture brought to the horror sphere, we don't get much when it comes to Indian culture, particularly in the horror film, or really most films in Western cinema. It's all laid over a very, very generic supernatural horror plot. I mean, right down to having a love interest who's helping our main character investigate. They're going through, they're putting the clues together to try to figure out how to defeat this demon. I mean, it is really paint by the numbers when you look at just the bare bones of the story itself and the script. Even the ending, everything about it is very cookie cutter horror film of this presentation. So you've seen this story done many a time. So thankfully we have that cultural aspect that really elevated what we were watching, because otherwise, pretty run of the mill. Also, outside of those two performances I mentioned earlier, some of these performances were a little bit more shaky, a little bit of overacting, certainly. And while I don't think Betty Gabriel was bad per se, oh my gosh, her character was definitely a horror trope because she had me like screaming in my seat at so many of the decisions she makes. I'm like, oh my gosh, you are a Black woman in a horror movie. What are you doing? So many questionable decisions. And while I think the vision was there for Bishal Dutta as a first-time director, when it came to just general directorial choices, as well as some editing choices, and even a little bit of the cinematography, you could tell this was a debut feature at points as we watched the film. I think so much of it was created and worked with the budget really well, and then we would get just a very off-the-wall type of edit that I was like, oh my, okay. Or a weird shot or weird framing that you're like, oh my, yeah, no, this is still a first-time director. He's still getting his footing. The more important aspect certainly is that he had such a strong vision that he certainly was able to overcome a couple of missteps in the overall scheme of it. So overall, I really, really enjoyed It Lives Inside. It's able to overcome those missteps. It's able to be more than its generic plot would suggest by giving you something new and fresh at the core of it all. The characters are characters that we can identify with and root for, connect with, and cheer on. It's a beautiful cultural story that incorporates so many things into the allegory of the demon itself here, that sometimes all you need is a pretty generic baseline story to infuse with the cultural flourishes to really make it shine. And that is exactly what It Lives Inside does. It Lives Inside is meant to release in theaters on September 22nd. And if you're a horror fan, I definitely recommend checking this one out. Give it a shot in theaters. You may just be pleasantly surprised. So that was my review for It Lives Inside. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, go ahead, click like down below and subscribe to the channel so that you are always up to date on all of my latest videos. Also, join in on the discussion. Did you see this at the Regal Mystery Movie? Or are you hyped to check out It Lives Inside? Let me know all of your thoughts either in the comment section down below, or you can hit me up on Twitter. I love you all so much for your continued support. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.